You're in a good place now. You are listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. Tonight we're talking about the summer vacations, family reunions. You know, when the summer comes, we have that time usually to take a trip, to go out of town, to see our family, or to do something with the family. And you know, it's supposed to be a good time. It's supposed to be fun. And sometimes it doesn't always go the way we plan it. Sometimes it doesn't always work out the way we intended it to work out. It's interesting because when we think about vacations, right? We think about fun, possibly fun in the sun. We think about maybe beaches. We think about chilling out. We think about drinking. We think about just having a great time and everybody wearing a real smile. But you know what? Sometimes vacations don't always go that way. Sometimes vacations don't always go as planned. We can plan all we want. We can think we got it all taken care of. And you know what? We get there and it's a complete disaster. And I thought tonight it's a perfect time to talk about it, being that they're redoing National Lampoon's Vacation. That's coming out here soon. They're redoing it, and it's the summertime, and a lot of people are taking trips. And I just recently took a trip, which ended up being a family reunion. So tonight I'm going to talk about my trip, about my scenario, about what happened to me, dealing with the pitfalls that might come about, but also I'm going to talk about 4 different concepts of things that you want to keep in mind in order to keep your mental clarity as well as keeping your sanity when you go on this summer vacation. You know, the first thing I want to talk about tonight, because I think it's important, is that things will definitely, possibly go wrong. It's true. Life's funny that way. I mean, you could have things smooth sailing, but then when you get on that trip, it could be all catastrophe. You never know what's going to happen. You don't want to sit there and expect catastrophe, but you don't want to ever expect perfection. You know, the idea of having no expectations is a high ranking right now. I talk about that in all my books. I talk about that. And it's about not expecting things. But because when we have expectations, we have a tendency of expecting things to go a certain way. And when they don't go that way, we have problems. We have issues. We get angry about it. We get frustrated. We feel like, God, why? God, why? Why did this have to happen on the vacation? So I want to talk a little bit about my recent vacation and put it all in perspective for everybody. I know a lot of times we talk about relationships on this show, and we're going to be talking about relationships a little bit later and marriages and everything that has to do with this vacation. But right now, I want to tell you a little bit about me, give you some insight. This is going to pour lots of insight into me. You're going to learn a little bit more, and guess what? It's probably going to make you laugh. Okay. So we were heading out to a family reunion, and my husband and I were flying out, and we go to the airport, we put the bags in, we do everything, we grab a little bite, we get on the plane, and we land. Flight's only about 4.5 hours, and we get off the flight, and we have to take a shuttle to get to the rental car place, and that's normal most of the time. So you get on the shuttle and you take the shuttle, and it's funny how you can always tell a little bit on trips when things seem to be delayed. But you have to not think about that. So when the shuttle place shows up and it takes them forever to come pick you up, you just kind of gotta roll with the punches, So we get to the rental car facility, and they tell you can pick a car on whatever row. So we pick the car. And as, I'm going through the car and I'm putting the stuff up, and I remember making the comment, man, I wish I could drive. And my husband's like, no, honey, I'm renting the car. So guess what? I'm driving. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. I like it. I'm a driver. Okay. I like to drive. I'm a winner. I'm a driver. Things are going to happen. I can feel it. I really like driving. And, that's cool. And all of a sudden, it was about 5 minutes into it, and I had put all the stuff in the back of the car, and he was going through his briefcase. And he's like, oh, God. Oh, no. And I go, what happened? He goes, oh, no. And I was like, what happened? He's like, I can't find my wallet. I said, what did you say? And he said, I can't find my wallet anywhere. So he goes and he looks again and he looks again and he looks again, and I go, oh, geez. I was like, gosh, I wonder if he lost it on the plane. And I was like, I wonder if he lost it at the airport. And he had been on a lot of calls on the way to the airport because of what? Because of work. And I think everybody understands when you're trying to take maybe even a 2-day trip and one of the days happens to fall over the weekday, if you have a lot of work going on, it can be difficult. And I remember thinking at one point in time, he always put his phone in his back pocket where his wallet was, and I'm wondering if it fell out at that point somewhere after we checked in from our departing city. So I was like, oh gosh, what are we going to do? And he's like, well, I can call around the airport later and see what we can do. In the meantime, you're going to have to rent the car. So I go up and rent the car, and it's funny. And like later on, I come back to the car, and he's like, see, you got what you wanted. I go, I didn't want to drive on this account. I didn't want to drive based on the fact that you lost your wallet, your credit cards, your ID, your license, all that stuff. I didn't want to do that. And so, there's a little bit of tension. And I think a lot of people can understand that's listening right now, that tension before. Now, whether it's that your wife lost her purse, or you lost your wallet, or whatever it was, there's something that's been lost. It's the kickoff of the trip, and it already kind of puts the trip in a certain perspective. Like, it's kind of stressing you out a little bit, right? But you're like, you know what? This too will pass. And just because he hasn't lost his wallet in 10 years, this doesn't mean there's an omen or anything. We just need to continue to go on and just keep going with this trip. So I went to rent the car, and we drive into where we were going. It took about an hour and a half with the traffic. And it's interesting because when you get places and the traffic, it's always interesting. And I always love to drive. And so, you have that whole concept of whoever's driving. And then you have the whole backseat driver concept, right? We've all been there before. In the battle of the sexes, okay, in the car, where you have the male driving and the female's like, honey, slow down. Or vice versa. Oh, honey, you got to speed up a little bit. I mean, this is, you're in the city. You need to speed up a little bit. And it's funny how that goes. And it's funny how when something really almost bad happens in a car, how when somebody yells about it, you kind of scream back at them. Because your nerves are all shot. You know what I mean? Your nerves are all shot. Your stomach's in your throat. You're like, I got it. Just back off. I got it. I figured it out, okay? Just be quiet. And then you kind of feel bad about lashing out. You know what I mean? So these are all qualities of a vacation, right? You're with me? Okay. So, get to the hotel. There's a lot of kind of difficulty getting into the hotel because you got a lot of people in front of you that don't know where they're going. And I'm like, you know what? We're just going to calm it down. We're just going to slow our roll. We're just going to do what we need to do. We're going to get there. And so, we fast forward, and that night's fine. Things go well. It's pouring down rain, though. I mean, I haven't been in this city before when it's pouring down rain. So at first it was great, and then it starts pouring down, and so you're taking a cab or Uber everywhere, which is fine. And the next day, my husband's got to get up early for work. So he goes up early for work, and I end up packing all the stuff and, getting it into the rental car and then meeting him later on and a couple hours later. So we decided to do a little sightseeing before we head up to the family reunion. And we were having a great time sightseeing, checking out things. And it's kind of nice just to walk around and see things. And there was one particular place I wanted to go. I'd already been there before, but he and I had not gone there together. And so while we were there, I was like, let's go there. So while we're there, he's like, you know what? We're about to leave that area and drive up north. And so we need to go about an hour without traffic up north to get to the reunion. And I kind of figured we probably want to get there in a decent time. But he's like, you know what? Hey, honey, you know what? I was giving you a hard time about wanting to go to that particular place. But you know what? I want to go. And it was like a park. It's like a park type thing. And it's kind of a glorified park, but it's a pretty cool park. And I was like, well, you know what? We don't have a lot of time right now. But I was like, okay. So I pull up on the side of the road, and there's a parking place where you actually buy the little parking permit. So you put your credit card in there, and you push the buttons, and you get the parking little piece of paper, and you open up your car and you stick it on the top of the car, and you lock it back. Well, it wasn't allowing me to get the parking. I think that it wasn't reading my credit card. So I drive around to another parking box. to pay for parking. And I buy 1 hour and I get the little ticket and I go back to the car. I stick it on the dash. I lock the car. So we head over to this park and I set my timer on my phone for 1 hour. And so it would time down. So, we're walking around, we're having a good time. And I kind of look down at my watch and I go, you know what? We probably need to head out because of the traffic. Traffic's going to be bad. It's going to take us an hour with no traffic. It'll take us 2 hours with traffic. So we probably should take off. So I look down. It's about 29 minutes into that hour. So we still had like 40 minutes, 30 minutes left. And so we get back over to where the car is. And guess what? The car's gone. It's nowhere to be found. And he's like, we must not have parked on the street. I was like, oh, heck yes, we parked on the street. We parked right here. And at first I'm thinking, oh my God, I hope our car has not been stolen. All our luggage was in there. His passport, his backup identification's in there. And if it's been stolen, he's not going anywhere. He's going to be there until we get an ID. So all this stuff's playing in my head. I'm just like, oh my God. I mean, everything's in there. So I walk into the store where the car was parked in front of. And I said, did y'all see anything? They said, see what? I said, did y'all see a Ford Focus parked right there? And they're like, what do you mean? I was like, it was right in front. And they go, no. And I said, well, we got towed, I guess, or our car's been stolen. So they're like, oh, no, and so everybody's trying to help, and everybody's being very nice. And something just told me to call 311. So I dial 311 on the phone, and I push parking dispatch for tow dispatch. And the dispatcher answers the phone. She's like, hello, how you doing? I was like, how you doing? I was like, I just want to see if y'all had a car. And I gave the tag number. And it was cool because the tag number started with H2O. And I picked that car because of the tag, which I thought was funny. And they said, no, we don't have that car. And I said, could you please look again? She looks again. She says, oh, yes. Okay, they have that car. It has been towed up to this tow place. Here's the address. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. When we return, we'll be talking more about how things do go wrong on a trip. More about how these things really do happen. I mean, you don't just see it in the movies. This is reality, and how you can deal with it. Because a lot of times we like to take our vacations and feel like they're going to be perfect. But sometimes they're not, and we got to learn how to deal. So stay tuned, because Perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back this time in 2 shakes.
Turn it up and jump in the deep end on Perspectives. Now, here's Ashley.
Welcome back live to Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. Tonight we're talking about Ashley's vacation. The vacation show is about to come out, the new one, and I thought it'd be a great time to talk about summer vacations now, being that a lot of people are taking them, a lot of people are wondering what to do, and a lot of people are scared from their last trip. And what I'm talking about is that sometimes our vacations aren't that smooth. Sometimes things happen that we never, ever anticipated. And those types of things can stress you out and ruin a trip and make you wonder why you're paying for pain. I remember I met a guy one time years ago on my honeymoon. And this gentleman and his wife were together, and he looked at me, he said, you got to be careful on certain trips. And I go, what do you mean? He goes, there's certain trips that are pleasurable, and then there's the other side of the coin. I go, what's the other side of the coin? He goes, well, Ashley, come here. Let me talk to you. And he whispered in my ear, he said, punishment vacations. I said, what the heck is that? He goes, let me explain to you. And so he explained to me about punishment vacations, the ones where you have to fly very far, take long journeys to get someplace, put yourself in situations you shouldn't have to put yourselves into, and having to pay for all this at the same time. And I said, so that's why you're here at the beach relaxing. He goes, yep, you got it. Take intelligent trips, make the right choice, don't screw up. And I remember that my whole life, but in the process of hearing him say that, and I learned a lot more from that man too. I don't remember his name, but he was a very intelligent, wise man. But since then, I've taken several punishment vacations. I've taken a lot. It's like I have gotten a PhD in how to have a punishment vacation. And I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Because it's funny how on vacations, everybody kind of always acts like their vacation's perfect. Like I was talking to somebody earlier this evening, they said, the last vacation I took with my family was awful. It was absolutely awful. Everything went south that could go south. The kids fought. It was the wrong time of the month for my wife. All this stuff. I thought we were going to get busy and have some action. That never happened. None of this actually came together, and in the forefront, all I had was I'm on a trip paying to deal with pain and all to be in the same room. And he goes, but why is it that some people sound like they have such a great trip? And I said, that's because they're very quick about it. They say, yep, we were in San Francisco, or yes, we were in Hawaii. They don't talk about what happened in Hawaii. Nobody talks about getting stung by the jellyfish and having to go to the hospital. Nobody talks about the wife, having a hissy fit and claiming that she might be pregnant while the husband has to go out and get a bunch of pregnancy tests, and they're all arguing about how they didn't want to have another child. Think about it. There's a lot of things that go down on a trip that nobody will ever hear about it. You'll never see it on Facebook. You'll never hear it mentioned on Instagram. And you'll never hear it mentioned out of their mouth. But normal, true people will talk about, when you're authentic, you'll talk about the pain and agony that you've dealt with when you're on a trip. So like I was talking about just a little while ago, that things will definitely go wrong if they need to. And so, first of all, my husband's lost his wallet. The second thing is now our car has been towed. And as we're heading up to the tow truck place to get the car, which ends up taking an hour and a half, and I have to prove the fact that I rented the car and all that great stuff, it was kind of just humorous after a while. Like at first, it was like I knew that I had to see the humor, but eventually it just got more and more humorous. And it was interesting to hear stories of people that their stories were way worse than my story. So this couple comes up to one of the windows at the towing facility, the police-run towing facility, and they were so angry, and they're like, you towed our car 2 hours after we bought it. It was brand new. I can't believe this. And so they had gone back, and they had to prove they had to get the insurance out of the car and whatever. They came back, they go, y'all not only towed it, you wrecked it. So I knew that things could definitely be worse. And the fact that we had our luggage and our car wasn't stolen wasn't that bad, but still, it's like kind of a comedy of errors, right? So an hour and a half passes. We get in the car, and I get up onto the highway, and sure enough, it's 5:25 on a Friday. 5:25 p.m. on a Friday, and nowhere to go because nobody's moving. Okay. Fast forward 2 hours in traffic, and eventually I just kind of started laughing about it because you kind of have to. You got to kind of realize that you got to laugh about it because, timing's going to be a little off. Timing's going to be off, and that's kind of where it's at, is that when you're dealing with things when they go wrong, the timing usually changes and things kind of go out of sync. But do they? But the biggest question is, do they? And that's something that I always think about, is that sometimes in life when bad things happen, there's definitely maybe possibly worse things that could happen. And I kind of have to look at it like that, is I'd rather have to deal with the car being towed than deal with something worse than that. The only thing you get stressed out about is that hoping that everything works out, that you can use a credit card, that you have funds, that you can get the car out. But other than that, once you get done stressing with that and you get the car back, it's kind of like back to normal. So 2 hours later, we drop off at the hotel, get our stuff in there. The first room that they send us to is a room with no windows. I've never seen anything like it before in my life. No windows. The only windows that there were windows that looked out into the hotel. And so if you opened the drape, everybody could see everything you're doing in the room. I was like, this isn't going to work. Can we get an exterior window? So we had to go back, and you know how that is. You go all the way up there, and they got to come all the way back. You're going to get the key. They were nice about it, but still at the same point, you're like, man, is this timing going to be like this the whole trip? Well, you know what? Pretty much. And I started realizing that the more I fought the timing issue, and that's the second comment I want to talk about, is timing might be off on a vacation. And the more we fight the timing issue, the more the timing fights back with us. You know it. You've been there before. Where there you are and you need to be somewhere. You get to the hotel and there's a long line. You wait. You wait a little while. You wait a little longer. You get a little more stressed out. You know the family's waiting on you. You know there's a little bit of stress. You know that just by being around family a little bit, you're going to be a little stressed out. So you finally get to that front desk and you check in and you do everything, and then they give you keys to a room that you're like, are you kidding me? And you don't ever have to go a short distance to that room. You know what I'm talking about. It's always a long, drawn-out process to get to the faraway room that something's wrong with it. That something's seriously wrong with, okay? And then you have to literally turn all the way back around, grab all your crap, and go back to that front desk. And a lot of us, we have to sit there and take a step back and do some meditation and kind of breathe, because at this point in time, you kind of like, oh, geez, what's going to happen next? But don't ever say that. Because when you say that, you open a floodgate for all kinds of things to happen. And so there we are. We finally get to the next room. We get our stuff. We lay it out, wash our hands, do that kind of thing, brush your teeth. I'm a big teeth brusher type person. I like to brush my teeth several times a day. It's a big deal for me. I really like to, and it makes my life, and I feel better about it. So brush my teeth, wash my hands, comb your hair, do that kind of thing. I think I changed my shoes. And we head over to our family's house. And when we walk in, everybody's outside, which is fine. Put my stuff down and everything. And it's interesting because, you know, there was a group gift that we were all putting money into because one of our family members, it was their birthday. It was his birthday. And so one person had decided, the son of his had decided to get a gift and everybody would put money in. And so I went into the room where the card was, you know, where you're supposed to sign it. You open up the card. There's like hardly any place to sign. I mean, I could have signed on the back probably, but I decided to sign on the front. Put my money in the spot where they had it for. Went outside, and the first thing that I get asked is, "Where you been? We've been all starving here, waiting on you. Didn't you get my messages?" I was like, "No, I never got any messages." And my phone never rang, and I never got any text messages. And I said, "Hey, I apologize for that, but I didn't get any." And they're like, "Where were you?" I was like, "Well, honestly, we were in traffic for 2 hours. But before that, I was an hour and a half at the tow truck place." They're like, "What happened?" "The rental car got towed." Oh, geez. So then everybody starts eating, and you get to see family, and that's always a good thing. But it's the timing issue. And the timing might be off on your trip, but you kind of got to let it go. And I've realized in life that when things kind of go wrong, you have to kind of think about how wrong is it really? How wrong is it? It could definitely have been worse. But also the biggest thing about timing, and this applies not only on vacation, this applies to your life every day, every second of the day. When timing seems to be pushing back at you, stop. Stop and breathe and figure out what it's trying to do. I can't explain it, but there's a reason why you can't fight it. It's almost like when you're running late and cars keep jumping out in front of you, or people keep stopping at yellow lights and there's no way around them, and you don't understand why this is happening to you because you just got to get to that meeting and it's just got to happen now. The more you fight it, the more it doesn't work. Think about it. If you're on the highway right now and you're driving and there's people that's driving like crazy, like not very good, you're having to drive around people. It's like the more we have to try to get around people, it's like those same people end up getting to the same point at the same time, even though we're stressed out, our heart's beating fast, we're swerving around people, we're having to use our brakes a lot, our brake pads are wearing down. I mean, it's like sometimes we have to just take a step back and say, you know what? Timing's been a little off, but is it really off, or is it the right time where I'm supposed to be at? Just because certain other people expected you to be somewhere else at a certain time doesn't mean that that's exactly what was supposed to happen. And I've realized that in life. When we return, I'm going to be talking about the attitudes of others and your attitude and what you can control and what you can't control when we return. Perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back in 2 shades.
Jake Busey, and you're listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. Tonight we're talking about that summer vacation, that family reunion, where not everything goes perfectly. We've all had those vacations that you remember that everything seemed to have gone really well. It was smooth, it was relaxing, and doggone it, I liked it. But for the most part, not every vacation is going to be that way. For the most part, things will go wrong. However, you might not even have an indication until that happens. Earlier in the show, I've been talking about how things will go wrong and how to accept it. You know, the second thing is timing may be off. And if the timing's off, you kind of got to deal with it. You got to go with the flow. I realize that because anytime that I've fought timing's won. I fought time and time won. I fought the time and the time won. Yeah, it did win. because I couldn't fight against it. No matter what I did, no matter how much I pushed, I was still going to be late, no matter what. And I was going to deal with it. But maybe I wasn't really truly late. Maybe I was just right on time. And sometimes we have to realize that we might not please everybody, but as long as we're safe and we're happy and we're doing what's right, we got to roll with that. And so that goes into the next concept of not being able to please everybody, okay? Not being able to please everybody means that the attitudes of others you won't be able to control, but guess what? You can control your attitude. You can control your attitude, and that's such a big deal. Because when you're traveling with family, relatives, children, sometimes things get a little out of control. Sometimes you get a little stressed out and you just wish you could just have some peace and quiet. So let's talk about that. So when we get there, we're obviously running late. Hour and a half at the tow truck company, 2 hours in traffic. Had to stop by the hotel and brush my teeth. That took about 10 minutes. Okay, we're running late. Everybody else has been there. Most people had gotten there the day before. Some people had gotten there 2 weeks before. Some people had gotten there a week before. Okay, so now that y'all are on target, there's about 20 people there. And I'm happy to see everybody. I get along with everybody. My husband, too. We all like everybody. But it's always interesting because you always have very different dynamics with a family. You always have very different dynamics, and you have people that you adore and people you don't really know that well. And a lot of times you don't really know them that well because you two have never really sat down and talked. Or subconsciously you just realize that you're not going to get along that well. Maybe that person rubs you the wrong way, or maybe you rub them the wrong way. Very interesting. So I walked outside and I said hi to everybody, and I thought everybody was great. And I really like everybody because you know what? It's not my family either. Haha, just kidding. It is my family, but it's a little different when it's not necessarily your immediate family, so it's a little easier. And I remember just dealing with the tow truck stuff, and I walked back inside. Everybody was drinking white wine, and I don't drink white wine. So I walked back inside, grabbed a cup, went into the liquor cabinet, poured myself some Kettle One, put some ice in it, and put some water in it. Made myself a drink, and I used my finger as a stir. I'd already washed my hands. Go back outside, and I'm hanging out with people. And there's people that you just love, and when you have a great attitude, and you have a real, true, honest, authentic attitude, it makes everything roll better. And when you don't take things personally, and that's such a big deal too. And a lot of time our attitude is based on our expectations. You know, when was the last time that you expected everything to go well, and it doesn't, and your attitude goes south? When was the last time you didn't expect anything? Things went mediocre, some things not so great, but it was the way you dealt with it. It's the way you handled it. And I think that's what's so important, because right after the tow truck and dealing with all that, I got in the car, and for about 5 to 10 minutes, and plus that hour and a half I was waiting and hoping that everything was going to go through and that my credit card would work and all that great stuff, I was stressed out. But once I got in the car and I started driving down the road at 5 miles an hour, I started lightening up. And as the traffic started to kind of dwindle after about an hour and a half into the drive, I started laughing. And it's all about attitude. I could sit there and hold on to that tow truck. I could sit there and hold on to the lost wallet. I could sit there and hold on to a parking fine of XYZ of $205. And earlier before that, I parked in a garage for $45 for 3 hours. I could sit there and hold on to that, or I could try to let it go. And I decided I'm going to let it go. And when I got there and we were late and some people were frustrated with us, I could hold on to that too, but I decided to let that go as well. It doesn't make a lot of sense to hold on to things when it's not helpful. And that's the key. And I think it's funny because if you look at even the original, vacation movie, certain bad things happen. A lot of bad things happen, but it's the way you deal with it. And at the end, everybody was happy. And there's certain things in the middle that got a little crazy, but it all kind of worked out. And that's how most of your trips will be. And it's like, you don't want to put all your happiness into this trip. You don't want to sit there and say, oh, if this trip goes well, I'm going to be happy. But you want to put it in perspective and realize that this is kind of a microcosm of probably your life. And sometimes things speed up on a trip. Like you can have more good things happen or more bad things happen, and that's all in parentheses. But I think one of the funny things is that on a trip, we always think the timing is going to be perfect, and it's not. And I think that's funny because for the most part, I would like to know how many couples actually have sex on a trip. I want to know that because I think a lot of times people are so stressed out. Some of us, you're in a big room with a lot of family. I mean, it's just not feasible. And sometimes for us women, you know, you pick the absolute wrong time of the month to go on a trip. And that also plays a part, too, because depending on the attitude, that can affect a lot of people. Because, you know, the whole concept of mom's not happy, nobody's happy. And I think it's interesting because I think vacations are just that kind of microcosm, and everybody's together and everybody's kind of close near each other. And so there's not a lot of breathing room. There's not a lot of privacy, right? Not a lot of privacy. And it's like you got to pick your moment. You got to pick your moment. And if you can pick the right moment and do what you need to do, you're in it to win it. If you can see things for how they happen and appreciate the situation and love it, that's awesome too. But when we start putting expectations and we start stressing out about things, that's when things go south. And I've seen so many couples at the airport yelling and screaming at one another. I can't believe it. I mean, it's awful. I've never seen people treat people so bad. And they're married. And it's like a lot of times we have to check ourselves and back up and say, wow, what's going on here? How have I allowed my anger to escalate this high? What can I do to change that? Do I need to take a time out? And sometimes taking a time out and walking down the street or going back to the room or grabbing a drink can change your entire attitude. And you're the only one who can control your attitude. You're the only one that can control your actions. That's like anything in any sort of life, in any sort of relationship. You can't control your wife, or you can't control your husband, or you can't control your kids. Now, you can control your kids with corporal punishment as far as, you know, hey, you're grounded, or I'm gonna lightly spank you or whatever if you continue to do this, or I'm going to tell you you can't come out, whatever it is. Point being is that you can only control in so much. You have to sit there and look and realize that other people have to control their own attitudes and have to deal with it. And so I think in vacations, a lot of times we see people up close and personal. And that's why I always tell clients when they come in and they say, you know what? I'm thinking about asking her to marry me. What do you think? And the first thing I always say to them is this. Have y'all taken a trip before? I asked them, have you taken a trip before together? Well, yeah. Well, what kind of trip? Oh, well, we flew to San Francisco and hung out in the wine country for 2 days and came home. No, I was like, no. That's an easy trip. That's a really easy, no-brainer. Anybody can get along, you know, in that trip. I mean, you could have, you know, Saddam Hussein and you know, and Gorbachev together on a trip like that. You could have had, you know, anybody. Think about it. You could have, you know, Justin Bieber and our president on a trip to San Francisco, and they'd have a blast. I'm talking about a real trip. I'm talking about a road trip. A road trip that has a certain amount of distance, and the road trip needs to be at least 8 hours long, and you have to be in the car together. That's a trip to see what things are really about. Because if you can deal with being on a road trip for more than 8 hours one way, not the best of digs to stay, and kind of having to work at it together, that's a good indication if you might want to marry this person. If all the wheels come off, okay, and you're skidding out of control, that's a good indication that maybe this might not be the right person, because if y'all can't handle a 10-hour drive together, then how do you think you're going to handle 50 years together? And that's so important, because a lot of times we see things always in the best of times and not in the times that we actually have to see it. And family vacations is one of those things where we have to deal with stuff up close and personal. We have to deal with attitudes of others and stresses of others, as well as, you know, harbored ill will or harbored will toward other people. And also dealing with some people that you don't even know that well. And as you get to know people, it's very interesting. And these trips can bring people together, or they can sever ties. When we return, we're going to be talking about how you can deal with the stresses of life, how you can deal with the stresses of vacation, and a couple of little tips of how to actually make the wise choices when it comes to planning your trip. Stay tuned, because Perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back this time in 2 shakes.
You could be my luck.
Get in here. You're listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
We'll be safe and sound.
Welcome back live to Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. Tonight we're talking about summer vacations, about vacation stress, and how to deal with it and what's going to happen. You know, earlier in the hour I talked about how things will go wrong. Also about timing. The timing might be off. It seems like things are kind of getting in your way. You're delayed. Sometimes you just got to sit back and not fight that. The third thing is about dealing with the attitudes of others. You can't control their attitude, but you can control your own. And once we realize that we can control our own attitude, it changes everything. And realize that you can't control what others do makes you realize the grand truth of things. And it puts things into perspective. But it also takes the stress off of you of trying to make other people happy. You can't make other people happy. No matter what you do, no matter what you say, you can't make other people happy. You can only make you happy. That's it. And when we begin to realize that and understand that and take that to heart, every single trip, every single day of our life will become easier. Because you need to focus on your happiness and you need to focus on how it makes you happy. If you're not happy right now, you have to determine why that is and figure out how to deal with it. And that's so important. Because I think when we realize our own happiness and that we can control our own happiness and we can decide our own happiness is when life changes. Because we can't put it on other people that we're unhappy. We can't sit there and say so-and-so did this, therefore I'm unhappy. No. We have to actually accept the fact that we control our happiness. We can't control others, but we can control our own. And on a trip, this is even more important than any other before, is that you are in normally a small closed environment with lots of people that you know, a lot of family. And, sometimes you're going to be at wit's end, but you got to deal with it and realize that your attitude presupposes everything. So if you walk in with a good attitude, the world's your oyster. And some people might balk at you and some people might argue, but you got to keep it up. And as you keep it up, guess what? You feel it, you know it, you feel good about yourself, and other people will follow suit. Think about it. When you walk into a room and you're smiling and you're happy, think about how most people will smile and be happy. At least smile back at you. If you walk into a room and you're frowning and you look like you're about to beat somebody up, you're going to get that same attitude back. People are mirrors. They don't even realize it. I mean, they even do it when they're in the car. Think about it in the car when there's two lanes, there's a stoplight, you and another car are at the stoplight, and if one of you thinks that it turns green but it doesn't, the other one's going to go too because they're watching you. When you walk into a situation and you're in a good mood, no matter how bad of a mood, most of the time they'll jump up to your mood. Unless they just want to deflate your balloon. And at that point in time, you have to realize, again, especially for everybody listening tonight about families, that you can't change their attitude. You cannot make other people happy. You can be happy, you can be a wonderful person, you can be authentic, and you can do the right thing. But still, that might not make other people happy, and you have to accept that. And when you accept that, that changes everything, because all of a sudden, you're no longer on the chopping block. You're no longer stressed out about making other people happy. You're over there thinking about, you know what? I'm going to just sit down and relax for a second. I'm not going to be the court jester. I'm not going to be the comedian unless I want to be the comedian. But I'm definitely not going to be the comedian because other people want me to be the comedian. I'm going to be the comedian because I'm the comedian. I'm going to make the jokes because I want to make the jokes. The next thing I want to talk about, it's how you deal with the stress. So when things aren't going right or things aren't going perfect, it's not about the things that aren't going perfect necessarily. It's about how you deal with the stress of things not going as well as you wanted them to. How you deal with it. So, for example, at the tow truck place, I could have lost it. But instead I realized that the person that towed my car wasn't behind the counter. Yes, what they did was wrong because it was entrapment. I bought a parking permit, I put it on my car, and they still towed my car. It was entrapment, sure, got it. But that person that towed me wasn't going to be there. And if I was going to have this big drawn-out fight, I would have just stressed everybody else out with me. Everybody would have been angry. I would have fought out loud. Who knows what would have happened? I definitely would have been a lot later getting to the family reunion, okay? And who knows? And I decided, you know what? The best I can do is be myself. And myself is a happy person. I'm generally happy. And I'm not going to let them take that away from me. I'm not going to let that tow truck guy that was obviously sitting on the next street over watching me as I got out of the car and deciding not to help me but wanted to tow my car immediately after I got out of the car and got out of eye shot, out of freaking eyes. That's when it happened. I'm not going to sit there and fight about it. Okay? I learned a lesson. And it's interesting how a lot of times we let these things get to us, but why? In the grand scheme of things, they're really small. Like they're minute. They're too small to even think about. It's like a blip. And it's interesting that we allow these things to get to us, and we can't. We have to let that go and get back on track. And it's the same as when you're having a really great day or a really bad day. When you're having a bad day, you go, well, I guess things can't get any worse. Never say that. They will get worse. Because you know what? You're still thinking that they're going to get worse. When you say, well, this day's been really in the crapper, I mean, I might as well just go home and go to bed. Well, you know what? After you said that, you probably should. When you're having a bad day, the best thing to do is to sit down and breathe and reset and recalibrate your mind and begin to think about the good things and let it go. Because the more we think about the bad things, and I mean bad in quotations, the more we think about the bad things, the not so pleasant things, the more the not so pleasant things come our way. Okay? And that's what we have to realize, is that the more time we spend thinking about something, we bring it toward us. And so when you're taking this trip, think about that. When you're around family and friends, the more happy you think, the more happy you be. The more positive you think, the more positive will come your way. Try it out. You can try it out tonight, right now. The more negative you're thinking, the more negative things are going to be, because you're putting that negative tinge to it and you're bringing it towards you. So now I want to give you just a few tips, Ashley vacation tips, to making your vacation a humdinger. Because you know what? That's what it's about, right? We want to have a good trip. We want to have fun, and we want to make it the best. It might not all work out, but it's just the way we look at things, right? It's our perspectives. It's our perspective of the trip. That's what matters. The first thing is you want to get all your work done as much as you can before you go on the trip. You want to get some of those big stressor things out of the way. Okay? And I underline this because a lot of times when we go on a trip, we go, okay, great, I get to drop all this stuff, and then I'm going to get on this trip, and it's going to be great. But the problem with that is that you're constantly thinking about the stress in your life. You're constantly thinking about what you have to go back and deal with. If you have to deal with something big, if you're getting audited by the IRS or something like that, and you're not dealing with it, you're going to be thinking about this the whole trip. Talk about not relaxing. So the best thing to do is to try to get those big issues out of the way if you can, or at least get to a road of close to recovery before you leave for your trip. Because it's just human nature. You're going to think about stressors. You're going to think about that. And when something like a trigger of the wallet being missing, or the car being towed, or an argument happening, those triggers trigger you to go, I don't even know why I'm on this trip. I don't even know why I went out of town. This was the stupidest thing I could have done. I can't believe I freaking went out of town when I had all this stuff to do. And that causes that circular logic. We've all been there before, where we start hating the fact that we're out of town and we're supposed to be having fun. We're supposed to be relaxing. This is supposed to be a vacation. This is supposed to be a vacation. This isn't supposed to be painful. You know, the second thing you want to do is you always want to, for everybody out there married to a woman, you always want to consult with the woman and figure out when is the best time for that particular trip to take. Figure out her internal schedule and make that work for you. Okay? Because we all know how, and I'm a woman and I know how I can, you know, there's some days I can be a little ornery. And those are not necessarily days I want to be on a trip. Okay? And I know that a lot of men out there go, well, you know what? It was rough, you know, when they're thinking about their wives. Well, you know what? It's rough for us, too. We don't necessarily want to be in close quarters with you when we're dealing with this internal clock, this schedule we have that we have obviously chosen unwisely to go on this trip on this specific week. And you know, it's so much better when everybody's feeling themselves, feeling good, feeling 100%. That's when you want to go on a trip. So remember to ask and consult that. And for all you women, figure that out. You should know what weeks are best for you and make it happen. Everybody wants to have a happy trip. Everybody wants mom to be happy. So you know what? You should make yourself happy. Go out of your way and say, hey, this is a good time for me, or this isn't a good time for me. But guess what? All in all, your husband's going to respect you for that. And for all husbands listening, you know, it's not a bad thing to remind of this. Because if you're not keeping tally, you should remind them, hey, by the way, is this week better or is this week better? Let's figure that out. Last but not least is you want to throw out all of your expectations. Throw your expectations away. Throw your sorries in a sack, mister. Throw your expectations away. Just throw them away because you know what? They've never done anything good for you. All they do is hold us back from having a good time. They hold us back from enjoying ourselves because they make us say, I thought everything was going to be this way, not that. I thought the room was going to look like this, not that. I thought the people were going to be nicer, not like that. Think about it. I thought the water was going to be warmer, not like that. So you have all these issues that you're dealing with. So when we throw our expectations away, we allow ourselves to actually begin to live. Because expectations hold us back from our living, they hold us back from our loving, and they get in the way of spontaneous fun. Because you're over there trying to plan everything. Because you expected to do this, and when things are not as expected, guess what? All hell breaks loose. And on a trip and in life, all this stuff works in your life and in a trip to work to get the big stuff out of the way so that the stress is not on you. Because when you're stressed out, you go to bed stressed out and you wake up stressed out. And that's not a healthy component. That's not a healthy way of living. The second thing is you want to consult with your family and make sure when is a good time for them so they're not over there stressing or dealing with things that they don't want to deal with on a trip. You know, because that's a big deal. You know, also the last but not least is you want to throw away those expectations. You want to let those go because that's really important. When we're able to do that in life, we begin to live. We have a better life and we have more fun. So, you know, when it comes to your vacation, laugh off the funny things. Let the funny things go because there's more stuff that I did not bring up. Some really, really funny things. However, some of those things you just got to let it go and say, you know what? That's what colors your life and makes it so interesting. Stay tuned. Next week, I got a great show for you. More on borderline personality disorder, relationships, how to define it, how to understand it, and how to know when you got to run. Stay tuned because Perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back this time at 3 Shakes.